Okay, here we are back to check our render. We're going to look at it through Nuke here. You can use a personal learning edition of Nuke to review your renders. It's a really good way to do it. There's a bit of a watermark as we've seen before, but it's a great way to start learning Nuke for one thing. The easy way to do it is you can file load, or if you just want to read it in, just type R. It'll go to, it'll go to your last directory. Here we have our master fag version 2 render. And to connect it to viewer 1, we can either manually connect it, or we can click on it and just type 1, and we automatically get it in there. And the way to make a preview is just to hit the play button and wait for it to cache. I actually want it to be a larger size than that, so with my mouse hovering over here, I'm just going to type the space bar. And you can see the little confetti watermark all over it. So let's just look at this a couple of times, watch it turn, and see look for the things that are really bugging us. So we have a technical issue still with the skin shader. Something going wrong with the subsurface scattering there. And it's strange because we didn't see this in the VPR. So there's some disconnect, some kind of a bug between the VPR and the final render, the F9, or rather the F10 render, that is not showing us this bug. So we're going to have to deal with that technical issue. That's probably the major thing. That's absolutely unacceptable. And the other things are aesthetic. For example, the beard, the facial hair that we painted on him looks actually really terrible. It just looks like a dirty face. So we're going to have to, there's not even anything under the chin here. We're going to have to fix that. What else here? The belt buckle, the skull there is just too shiny. We're going to have to bring that down. I think probably maybe a diffuse map or a reflection map or a combination of those. I think it'd be nice to dirty up some of the crevices there. Let's look and see if there's anything else that really jumps out at us. There's sampling issues with the leather where it's really smooth. We can simply improve our sampling rates, turn our anti-aliasing adaptive threshold down, and that should resolve that. The boots are looking really nice. That texture worked out much nicer than I expected on those boots actually. The gun's looking good. The leather gloves feel really nice. So yeah, so I guess we're talking about those three main things: the technical issue of the skin, the brightness of the belt buckle, and the facial hair we're going to have to deal with. Might even want to put a bit of a sunburn on his face. That might not be a bad idea. He was looking a little bit pale up there. Okay, so let's fire up Lightwave and we'll get right to it. Okay, so here's an interesting problem. What we see here on the screen right now is an F9 render and a VPR render side by side. And you can see that they're pretty close except for the skin. So something really wacky is happening with the skin either in the renderer or in the VPR. What matters is that it comes out right in the render instead of the VPR. So there's a bug going, and this is in 10.1. We'll have to check this out in 11 and see if it has been resolved yet. But in the meantime, we have a pressing problem, and that is that we need to fix this. So let's, I'll minimize this and let's take a look at our surface editor and see what we have going on in the skin. So we're using the fast skin shader. Let's see what additional shaders we have. For subsurface scattering, we have SSS, Legacy, SSS, SSS2, and in materials we have fast skin, simple skin, and skin. So let's try switching out skin and see if that helps us at all. The first thing we have to do is decide what to do with our result here from the color in the maps. So diffuse color was probably skin color, and epidermis color, which is underneath, is probably scattering color. Let's just zoom in there and hook those up. Actually, I don't think we even need to unhook them from there. We can just add another one. Skin color and scattering color. And now we'll just disconnect this material and connect the new material. And we'll just see if that works any better. Definitely looks better in the VPR. Let's compare it in an F9 render and see how it's looking there. Okay, just for the fun of it, I fired up Lightwave 11 and I wanted to compare the difference between the VPR and the skin shader to see if it had been resolved. And actually, if you look at it now, here's the VPR and here's the actual render. And the problem is actually worse. And I'm not sure why that happened. Clearly some work has been done that has affected the VPR. The good news is that the actual render looks much improved. So we're not seeing those really crazy harsh lines. I should probably check a few more frames just to be sure about that. Let's see. I think when we were looking around the back we saw some pretty harsh lines. And we'll do a quick F9 render of that to see if we, because we're seeing lines right along this jacket here. So we'll check that in the F9 as well. So there's our finished frame, and yeah, once again it looks like the really harsh, strange lines are gone. So fixing the subsurface scattering shader issue that we're having, those crazy lines on the skin, appears to be resolved simply by updating to Lightwave 11. And let's just double check what shader we were using on that, because there's a number of choices. We were using the fast skin shader. So it looks like some issues have been resolved there in the new version of Lightwave. Let's go back around to the front view and let's take a look at the face. So I'll go into a perspective view, move in on the face there. And the problem is, since the VPR isn't working properly anymore, I don't know if I'm going to be able to use it to check the map on the face. Maybe if I disable the subsurface. Let's see here. Yeah, maybe if I'll just take this and stick it straight into color and just remove the material for the moment. And that should at least help me in painting up that beard that was looking so strange before. Part of the issue is there's no beard underneath the chin, which was looking pretty strange. And the render is all looking pretty dirty. Alright, so yeah, so we can see the beard ends right up here on top of the chin, and we definitely want to paint some of it underneath. Let's see where the wire goes to here. Alright, so we're just having a bit of a clipping plane problem there. Probably should look in the modeler. And we'll look at, let's see, we'll switch this view to UV texture. Pick the, which one is it here? Head UV, there it is. And we want to make sure we paint right down, let's go to poly mode. We want to make sure we paint right down on the neck here. Yeah, so that's the part where we're missing. Let's put our map in the background here, and it's called facial hair. Yeah, so we can see that we're definitely missing that whole background. Okay, so this is a trip back into Photoshop to adjust this facial hair mask. So let's switch over to Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop. We'll turn our UV layer on and zoom in a little closer. Basically, we just want to paint a little further down. So let's pick a color off of there. And I'll grab my pen. See if we have the right brush here. Clearly not. A much larger brush. I'm going to softly brush this. Whoops. That's. I need to bring my flow way down. There we go. I want to be careful not to cross those UV lines or I'll have a seam on the edge. And that's no good either. So I'm going to have to erase some of this. A little softer erase will be better. And let's see. Let's get a little bit more in there. And I think we're going to bring down the overall opacity. And we'll add a few more dots here as well. It's going to take a while, but it's worth it. The extra detail is really definitely worth it. Just using my mouse at the moment. You'll hear it clicking in the background. The reason I'm not using my pen is because I had actually unplugged my Wacom tablet, and I don't really want to plug it back in while I have everything running. Unless the software is already unstable enough without throwing that at it in the middle of a tutorial. Normally I'd be using my pen though. Alright. I'm going to save this as facial hair. I'm going to save it as a target file first of all. Facial hair underscore V02. And pop back into layout, into the image editor, and replace facial hair. There it is. Replace it with facial hair version 2. And VPR probably won't help us much here. Oh yeah, it does. It's showing up not bad. Alright, let's turn our skin shader back on the face and see what happens. Plug our material back in. I'm going to take the color and put it back into this multiply node. Well, that's kind of strange. Let's see. Yeah, for whatever reason that material just isn't working right. So we'll just turn off the VPR. We'll give it an F9 render. See how that looks. So there's the render. It's not looking quite so dirty anymore, and that could partially be because of the fix in the subsurface scattering shader as well. So I think we're actually going to have to re-render this turntable again to ensure that that skin shader is working properly. We might need to make yet another set of changes, but we'll see after we render it. In the meantime, the last thing that was bothering me was the skull belt buckle on the front. So let's take a look at that material. First I'll save everything. So you just need to save the objects where I've made some material changes. And let's pop into Modeler and take a look at that belt buckle. Actually, let's first look at its material. Belt, there it is. Belt skull. So the material is simply, it's a very simple material. Just some reflection, probably some reflection blurring. Nope, not even any reflection blurring. Just a bump map. Alright, so we've done a simple bump map, some reflection, fairly low diffuse, and that's it. So this is a very simple material, and I think it just needs a diffuse map painted in so it's a little darker in certain crevices. I wonder if this object has a UV set. Let's take a look into Modeler. So we'll look at the belt object, and we'll check the belt UV. And yes, in fact, it does have a UV set, which means that we have a belt image in there. So let's pop back into Photoshop and find that. Belt. Okay. Let's open up this image belt. So there's our UVs. Oh yeah, right, we had the belt texture. And what we want to create now is a new layer. For the diffuse map. So first of all, let's want it to be 100% diffuse by default. So we'll fill in this new layer with white. I'll bring its opacity down so I can see through it. And I'm going to paint some black into it. So I'll just grab a brush, a soft brush. Should probably zoom in on that a bit. And where do I want to darken it down? Probably in the eye sockets would be nice. I might use this as more than a diffuse map too. Might also be might also be a reflection map, since the bulk of what we're seeing on this object is reflection anyways. Actually, maybe reflection map is the correct way to go. And probably might be nice to have some little darkness among the teeth here. And probably in the nose hole as well. And then let's just turn off this layer and put our opacity back so we can fill those colors in. That's better. Alright, so let's save this as Belt Skull Diffuse. and I'll save that as a target file. Diff. And let's pop into layout and add that as a, well, first we'll add it as a diffuse map. So it's going to be UV projected on the belt UV set. We need to load the image, belt skull diff. And I think we'll also apply this. Well, let's see, I need to go into the texture editor to copy it, so I need to copy this layer. Copy selected layers, and then I'll go into the reflection and paste it. Now it's in both channels. And now let's take a look. I want to look through the camera here. And we'll probably a good idea to do a limited region render so we don't have to render the whole thing. It's a little bit speedier. Give that an F9 and see how it comes out. So, yeah, that looks a lot better to me. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my limiter region. It's Control L. I have to hit it twice because there's one with borders, one without borders, and then off. So if you hit Control L once, limiter region will come on, and it will leave the whole black outside of the border on. If you hit Control L a second time, it'll render just what's in the limited region without borders, and if you hit it a third time, it'll go off again. So I'm going to set this up for a turntable render, and I want it to be a fairly high quality render. This is going to take a while. I'm probably going to have to leave this overnight since I'm just rendering on a single box for this project. I'll open my camera properties, and what I'm looking for, what's going to be important to me is the samples and the adaptive sampling threshold. I see photoreal motion blur is turned on. Here's a very interesting point. In Lightwave 11, instead of having anti-aliasing numbered, there's now minimum and maximum samples. So I'm going to set my minimum samples to 3 and my maximum samples to 20 and see where that gets me. My adaptive sampling threshold I'm going to set to 0.03, which is a typical production quality threshold for adaptive sampling. I'm going to go to my General tab and make sure my frames are all set up. I'll go to my Output tab. I'm going to name these RGB files. This time they're going to be masterfrag 03. This is our third kick at this one. And I believe we are ready to render. So I'm going to hit the F10 button, and I'll be back probably tomorrow when it's done. Okay, so here is our final render. You know, I could continue to work on this probably for several hours. And, you know, the old saying is art is never finished, it's only abandoned. One thing that really stands out to me is that the skin shader, while it's working nicely now, the color of the body is a little more saturated than the color of the arms, so I'd probably either paint or repaint or change the saturation of the arms to match this body. I'd probably work on bringing out the body hair a little bit more. Looks like I brought the facial hair down a little bit too much. There's still a couple of stretches on the gun. I'd probably work on some additional detail on the pants, maybe some seams, maybe some tears or scratches or patches, just dirty them up a little bit. Same thing on the jacket. You know, there's just tons of details you could just go over and over and over. Maybe some scars on the skin, maybe on the face. We could go on forever. However, I actually think this tutorial's gone on pretty long. And if you've gotten this far, you've been very patient in following through everything that we've gone through. We've covered a lot of techniques. We've covered some very basic texture creation techniques. We've covered some really good procedural techniques, for example on those gloves, which are looking really good, and we've covered some very simple to fairly complex node-based material creation techniques. So we've covered a fairly broad range from beginner to advanced. I hope that you've found this tutorial useful. If you have any suggestions on how we could improve it, if you think we've missed anything, please don't hesitate to contact us at contact@cgmasters.com. Thanks, and see you in the next tutorial.